Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful today that we can hear the sound of that mighty rushing wind. And we're thankful today that it's closer now than it's ever been. We're praising you this morning that you are going to pour out the greatest gift that heaven could bestow in the latter rain. We're thankful for the glorious promise that Jesus made when he said, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. We rejoice today in your goodness to us. And we're thankful that Jesus will one day come again. We pray for the Holy Spirit to join us this morning continually in all that is shared. May you and you alone be exalted. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
We have looked at some different people recently who are somewhat unknown. We looked at Micah. We looked at Nahum. And this morning we're going to look at Habakkuk. Now some people aren't even sure how to pronounce this prophet's name. Some people say it's Habakkuk, and some people say it's Habakkuk. But we're going to find some very, very amazing things in this book. Now, before we get started, I'm going to do something that I've done the last few Sabbaths that I've been here. And I'm going to ask if there is some verse in the book of Habakkuk that stands out to you. Can you think of a verse? All right, Graham, Chuck, what do we have?
Well, I don't know if the hymn is in our hymn, I'll have to look. I don't think it is, but in the old English hymnal in England, there is a song. And part of it is taken from this verse, which is verse... I lost it. Oh yeah, here it is. It's verse 2 of chapter 2.
Okay.
And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it.
Okay.
The song starts off, there is a book who runs may read, which heavenly truth imparts. And that's taken from that verse, and I love that song. I love that verse.
Okay. So according to that, it's an English song.
Yeah. I think
Okay. And it's based in Habakkuk 2, verse 2. All righty. Thanks, Graham. Chuck.
No, I didn't. I figured you're going to go there anyway, but it's Habakkuk chapter 3, verses 17 to 19. Those verses, I haven't memorized them. I know what it's about. I know what it means to me.
Okay.
And it just strikes me as just a wind-up of the whole book of Habakkuk.
Okay. We're going to look at those verses, Chuck, in Habakkuk 3, verses 17 to 19. The verses, let's read them. They're beautiful verses. And they're going to make perfect sense as we read through the entire book of Habakkuk. Verses 17 through 19 of Habakkuk chapter 3. It says, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines. The labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon mine high places. to the chief singer on my stringed instruments. You know, that applied in Habakkuk's day, and we will find out why in just a little while. But it also applies to another people at another time. And I want to read it to you. In Desire of Ages, page 122. This is what Elijah has to say. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell. It will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. See Revelation 13:11 through 17. Where is Ellen White applying? What events are we talking about? We're talking about in the future, aren't we? Heading towards the time of trouble. That's right, Cecil. But to the obedient is given the promise. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His water shall be sure. Isaiah 33:16. By this promise the children of God will live. When the earth shall be wasted with famine, they shall be fed. To that time of distress, the prophet Habakkuk looked forward, and his words expressed the faith of the church. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall there be any fruit in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. So Elijah applies Habakkuk 3:17 to 19 to the future. And this is the faith right here that will inspire us and those who will be with us to go through the time when this earth is decimated by famine and destruction. So that's how Habakkuk 3 is applied through Elijah the prophet. It applies still to the future. Now, any other verses? Habakkuk 1:13. Okay, let's take a look at it. Habakkuk 1:13. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he? Okay? Anybody else? Chapter 2, verse 3, Donna, okay? Habakkuk 2, verse 3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Okay. Precious promise. Anybody else? Verse 4? This was the Reformation verse, wasn't it, Dennis? That's right. Verse 4, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. That's what Martin Luther, you remember as he was going up the steps in Rome, when he visited Rome right around 1517, 1518, he went to Rome, he saw the city, And then he went in and he was doing all types of works, and he was going up the steps. Pilate's staircase, they called it, the very steps that Christ was supposed to have gone up. And he's crawling up those steps to earn brownie points with God. And into his mind rang these words, "The just shall live by faith." And Martin Luther got up off the steps and he went out, and he was never the same again. So Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4 were the ringing words of the Reformation. Yes. All right. Let's go back and let's take a look at Habakkuk right at the beginning. Probably the best place to start is in Prophets and Kings. I want to start by reading a portion of Prophets and Kings, page 384. It says, "At the time Josiah began to rule, and for many years before, the true-hearted in Judah were questioning whether God's promises to ancient Israel could ever be fulfilled. From a human point of view, the divine purpose for the chosen nation seemed almost impossible of accomplishment. The apostasy of former centuries had gathered strength with the passing years. 10 of the tribes had been scattered among the heathen. Only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remained, and even these now seemed on the verge of moral and national ruin. The prophets had begun to foretell the utter destruction of their fair city, where stood the temple built by Solomon, and where all their earthly hopes of national greatness had centered. Could it be that God was about to turn aside from his avowed purpose of bringing deliverance to those who should put their trust in him? In the face of the long-continued persecution of the righteous and of the apparent prosperity of the wicked, could those who had remained true to God hope for better days? These anxious questionings were voiced by the prophet Habakkuk. Viewing the situation of the faithful in his day, he expressed the burden of his heart in the inquiry, "O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save? Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance?" So Habakkuk prophesied in the times of good King Josiah. Now, does anybody know when good King Josiah was king? Does anybody know?
He was a little boy when he took the throne.
Okay, he was a very young boy. He was about 8 years old when he became king of Judah, the 2 southern tribes. Josiah was the last faithful king of Judah. After him came Jehoiachin, Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, and it was about 25 years after Josiah died that a king named Nebuchadnezzar came in and sacked Jerusalem. So Habakkuk prophesied in Judah around 25 or 30 years before Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon came in and wiped out God's people. Now, who else lived then during the time of Habakkuk? There were other famous prophets in Israel that prophesied at this very same time. Now, who were some of them? Think about it for a minute. Babylonian captivity, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel and Habakkuk, Daniel was younger, but they lived right about the same time. Okay? Can you think of somebody else who prophesied at the very same time of Habakkuk? He was known as the weeping prophet. Jeremiah and Habakkuk very likely knew each other because they prophesied at the very same time, in the very same place. Ezekiel was another man who lived and prophesied at this very same hour of Earth's history. So Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, and Habakkuk were all contemporaries. Now Habakkuk was very human, wasn't he? Very human. If you notice in verse 1 of chapter 1, it says, "The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see." Now if you're watching desolation and destruction, I think we would say the same thing he did. Verse 2, he said, "O Lord, how long shall I cry and thou wilt not hear?" Have you ever thought that? Lord, I'm praying and I feel like they're not getting any higher than the ceiling. Why won't you hear what I'm saying? Why don't I see any change? My prayers don't seem to be working. Habakkuk felt that way. He said, "I even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save." What was Habakkuk seeing? What would make Judah so bad that God would allow Nebuchadnezzar to come in? Things were terrible in Judah. Idolatry, adultery. They were worshiping Moloch. And what was Moloch? Moloch was the stone god with the stone arms. Fires were kindled underneath him, and people would strap their children to Moloch. It was a horrible time. And here is Habakkuk in Judah and Jerusalem, and he's saying, "Lord, I've been crying out to you to deal with this problem, and I don't see any solutions. I've been praying for you to change what's going on, and there is no change. It's getting worse. It's getting worse." He said, "I see people cutting each other down. I see violence. I see treachery. But I don't see any benefits. I don't see any change. It's only getting worse." And then in verse 3, Habakkuk raises the obvious question. Why do you show me iniquity? Why do you cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are they that raise up strife and contention. How many times have we been in a situation where we are praying, and instead of the situation getting better, it's only getting worse? Have you ever been in a situation like that? And we think, "God, you're not hearing me. I'm telling you to reverse it, and you're making it worse. You're allowing it to be worse." Why does God do that? If we say, "Lord, please change this situation," or "please change so-and-so," and He doesn't do it, and it gets worse than it was, is God answering my prayer? You know why? Because God is going to use the very thing that we want to be changed so badly. He allows it to get worse to change us. So that I will not go to Him simply because of what I want. I will go to Him because of who He is. And that's what heaven desires, isn't it? Does God want us to come to Him because we think He is the one who comes the 25th of December and He's going to give us everything that we ask? Is that how He wants us to feel about Him? No. And so when we pray and we say, please change this, Lord, it's hurting me inside. He says, I know it's hurting you inside. Diane, what?
Did you see that sign on the way to church at one of the churches that says, don't expect a $10,000 answer to a 10-cent prayer?
I read that. Yep. There was a little sign on the way. It's on 44B coming in. It says, don't expect a $10,000 answer to a 10-cent prayer. Yeah, I saw that. Too often we find ourselves praying, and it's not so that we will be humbled, but it's so that God will give us what we want.
How many of us have sweated blood when we pray like Jesus did?
No, we haven't,
That's
Graham.
whether you're really in earnest about what you're praying about.
That's right. That's right. And Christ was doing it not because He wanted something for Himself.
Jacob prayed he wanted something.
Yeah. Yeah. So Habakkuk said, why do you show me iniquity and cause me to behold grievance? Spoiling and violence are before me, and there are they that raise up strife and contention. The law is slacked. Verse 4, judgment doth never go forth, for the wicked doth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. Now let us remember at this point that Habakkuk wrote for his time, partially, but mostly Habakkuk wrote for us. Because once again our verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 11 says, now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. So Habakkuk wrote primarily for us today. Now, verse 5. Behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously. For I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. What? God is going to work a work in your days, which even if He told us it was going to happen, we wouldn't believe it. Now, what work was that? What was God going to do? Notice, verse 6 tells us, Lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. Chaldeans. But there aren't any Chaldeans today, are there? The Chaldeans make up modern day Iraq. You say, oh, this applies to Saddam Hussein. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I raise up the Chaldeans, and they will march through the breadth of the land. What land would the Chaldeans march through? What land was that?
Middle East.
Specifically in the Middle East.
Israel.
Israel. So the Chaldeans, according to Habakkuk 1 and verse 6, the Chaldeans would march through Israel. Now, who are the Chaldeans today? The Chaldeans were Babylon anciently, right? Chaldeans and Babylon were synonymous terms. Who are the Chaldeans today? Do we have a Babylon today? We do, don't we? Revelation 17, it's called Babylon the Great. And Dennis, who does Babylon the Great represent? The Catholic Church, the papacy. What does Habakkuk 1 say? Let's read it again, verses 5 and 6. Behold ye among the heathen, regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. What did Habakkuk prophesy? He said, you know what? At the end of Earth's history, Babylon the Great is going to march through God's last day church. That's what Habakkuk said. Because you remember, Habakkuk is writing for those upon whom the ends of the world are come. Now let me ask you a question for those of you who have been Seventh-day Adventists for a while. If somebody had told you 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, that you would go into a Seventh-day Adventist church, and the person would angrily tell you you couldn't have victory over sin. Or 20 or 30 years ago, you had been in an Adventist church and somebody from the pulpit denounced the writings of Ellen White. Would you have believed it? You would have said, that couldn't happen. They're Seventh-day Adventists. They'd never do that. But Habakkuk says they would. Habakkuk says they would march through the breadth of the land. Has Babylon the Great marched through the breadth of the land?
You're doing a pretty good job.
Yes, they have. And they're not done yet. Who would have ever dreamed that the man many people knew as the Prince of Seventh-day Adventist preachers by the name of George Vandeman? Who would have ever dreamed that he would write a book called The Rise and Fall of the Antichrist? And on page 54 and 55 of the book, he would say something like this. He says, it's not for us to question the motives of our medieval ancestors. He's talking about the Catholic Church. Would it not be better to pray with our Savior, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do? Nor must we overlook the good done by the church, the papacy. Throughout the world, monasteries provided care for orphans, widows, and the sick. And all of us owe appreciation to the church of the Middle Ages for preserving the Scriptures. That's right. They destroyed them. Would anybody have ever dreamed that George Vandeman would say that the papacy, we owe them a debt for saving the Scriptures through the dark? Would anybody ever believe that? No. The reason that this man would say such a thing as that? It's for this reason. And Habakkuk 1:6 tells us, Lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land. Babylon the Great has marched through the breadth of the land. They have marched through God's church at the end of time. And they have told people like this one, you're going to change your message, or we're going to do something to you.
Because it's politically correct. It's beautifully politically correct.
That's right. And what does Habakkuk 1:5 say? It says, Behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which you will not believe, though it be told you. If somebody had told me when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, Bill, 20 years from now you're going to have an independent ministry in Florida, I would have said, are you crazy? I'm going to be a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm going to work in the church. I'm going to be a teacher and a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist church till I die. I'm not going to leave this church. If somebody had told me that 20 years ago, I would have said, you know, you've been drinking something or sniffing something. Folk, Habakkuk told us it was going to happen. Habakkuk told us. Verse 7, they are terrible, dreadful. Their judgment, their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses, verse 8, are swifter than the leopards and are more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen shall spread themselves. Their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. How successful would Babylon the Great be when it comes through the breadth of the land? Would it only get George Vandeman or maybe William Johnson or Jan Paulson? Oh, no. No. Notice verse 9. They shall come all for violence. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. Now, can you count the sand? You can't count the sand, can you? You go over to Daytona Beach, and you take a look down the beach, and you see the sand. Habakkuk said that's how many captives would be taken from God's people. Now, have we lived through that? Well, we've lived through a lot of it, Augie. Maybe not its final picture, but we've lived through a lot of it. Babylon the Great has marched through the land. And they have slain millions. They have gathered the captivity as the sand. And all of you in this room pass at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 conference churches on your way to Truth Triumphant.
I saw a sign of a changeable letter out this morning, Pastor, outside of the Little Wooden Church. It said, "A church alive is worth the drive." Oh, you got that?
Why? Why do people, when I go to different places, they say, oh, I wish we could hear this. I wish we could come to a place and hear this every Sabbath. Why are they in that position? Habakkuk's already told us. Because the Chaldeans have marched through the land. and the captivity is as the sands of the sea.
I guess you don't realize it when you don't have a church to go to.
No, you don't, Augie. No, you don't. Do you see why Habakkuk was discouraged? He said, Lord, I'm praying. I'm praying that something will change for the better. But did it? No. It only got worse. It only got worse. And has it gotten worse today? Can it get worse than it is today? It looks terrible. It looks awful. But you know, the book of Habakkuk has 3 chapters. Not just one, it's got 3. And I want you to notice in Habakkuk chapter 2, we're going to skip a little bit now, but Habakkuk saw what we have seen. And Habakkuk said, God's people would be taken captive as the sands of the sea. But it doesn't end there. Because in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14, we read these words. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Amen.
God's people are taken captive as the sand. But God still has a people who will be used to reveal the character of God to all the world. God's purpose for Israel, for Seventh-day Adventism, will be fulfilled. Habakkuk 2, the earth will be filled with a knowledge of the glory of the Lord. How will that happen? How will that possibly happen? You know why? Because Habakkuk knew the same song that Diane knew. Because Habakkuk heard the sound of a mighty rushing wind. Because under the power of the latter rain, the earth will be filled with a knowledge of the glory of the character of God. Just as the water covers the sea, so this earth will know of God's character. Will it happen with those who have been taken captive by the Chaldeans? No. No. They're drunk. They're drunk. But God will have a remnant whom He will use to fill the earth with a knowledge of His character. As Revelation 18:1 says, and I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Habakkuk knew, in spite of all the troubles in God's church, he said in Habakkuk 2 and verse 20, he said, but the Lord is in His holy temple.
Amen.
Let all the earth keep silence before Him. No matter how many captives there are, no matter how many churches fall, no matter how many people go over to the side of the enemy, the Lord is still in His holy temple. And we can still be silent before Him. God is still in control. He still calls the shots on planet Earth. So that we can say, as Habakkuk did in Habakkuk chapter 3. Things can look bad, although the fig tree, verse 17, shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines. The labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And why could Habakkuk say that? And why can we say that today and in the future? It's because the Lord is in His holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before Him. I want to take a look at one last passage and then we will close for this morning. How is it, with God's people taken into Babylonian captivity as the sands of the sea, how is it that we can be hopeful? How is it that God's throne from everlasting to everlasting is sure? How do we know that? How do we know that this promise that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God's glory as the waters cover the sea, how do we know that will be fulfilled? We know it because of something in Habakkuk chapter 3 and verse 4. Okay, Dennis, that's a part of it too. That's true. Want to read something in Habakkuk 3 and verse 4. It says, "And his brightness was as the light. He had horns or beams coming out of his hand, and there was the hiding of his power." We read in Great Controversy, page 674, "Upon his wounded head, upon his side, his hands and feet are the only traces of the cruel work that sin has wrought." And then Habakkuk 3 and verse 4 is quoted. And then these words, "That pierced side where flowed the crimson stream that reconciled man to God, there is the Savior's glory. There is the hiding of His power. Mighty to save through the sacrifice of redemption. He was therefore strong to execute justice upon them that despised His mercy." So the promises and the truth of God is dependent upon that spear that comes out of His side, where that crimson stream flowed of blood and water. And there is the hiding of Christ's power. Out of weakness on the cross, Christ becomes the eternal power. And in our weakness, as we are humbled before God, it is in that weakness that God will make us strong and able to take His messages to all the world. Praise God this morning. He is in His holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before Him. Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, You who reign between the cherubim in your holy temple. Thank you for the book of Habakkuk, that we can see just what he saw because we're living through it. Father, I pray that you would help each one of us day in and day out to know that you are in your holy temple. Let all of us be silent before you. Thank you that you're still at the helm. Thank you you're still in control. And in all the experiences Habakkuk went through, thank you that you were his source of strength and keeping power. Thank you that you'll be the same for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.